Hi, I'm Terry Elton, and I'm going to be the teacher for this Theological Leadership in Change and Conflict class. I'm excited to teach this. This is a class I've taught many times, but being online and it's a little bit different, and there's a couple aspects that might be a little confusing. So this video is going to walk you through the syllabus and going to explain some of the assignments to hopefully get you off on a good start. So if you haven't, pick up your syllabus. Pause this if you have to go get it, and then come on back. So one of the things that's really cool for me about this class is so often when we look at leading change, people talk about it really from either a theoretical or real pragmatic way. What shall I do? How shall I think about this? What's really great about this class is it starts with theology, and it weaves theology, your own experience, and your own leadership gifts and skills with theory and practice, or some of those kinds of things, strategically what we'll do. And so it's complicated on many levels. And so we're going to pull it apart at times, and we're going to put it back together. So if you look at the objectives, by the end, I want you to have begun to think about what's a theology of change. How can you think about who is God, and how does that impact not only how you think about change, but how you will lead and how you will be a ministry leader working with change. Second is we're going to do a lot with resources. I've suggested some. You're going to create annotated bibliography and share some of those with each others. Lack of resources is not usually the issue. The issue is usually what resources for what scenario. So we're going to deal some with that. Number 3, we want you to become aware of what are key issues to be thinking about as you're thinking about leading change and conflict. 4 is you're going to be actively engaged with your peers. You already are starting that process with your Google Hangout groups, but you'll be doing that through some online sharing and stuff as well. And then finally, this whole course comes together in a final project that I'm going to spend some time talking about today. So if you haven't looked at the site or got your books, there's a couple books, but then there's some e-resources. Most of the stuff online will be in these online units, which I'll talk about in a minute. And one of the things that you'll see laid out in the syllabus at the end is that each week of the 6 weeks, there are 3 areas that you're going to be working with. You're going to be looking at change personally, and that's going to be mostly around the Keegan and Leahy book and reading some of that and reflecting on it. And primarily that will be seen in 2 ways. You're going to talk about that in your group each week, and then there's a reflection paper to use that book, and then the change and conflict temperament, those 2 things as part of that reflection. There's also a theological and theoretical component. Those will be done through online units. I've posted the first one, which has a TED Talk. It has some questions that go with the TED Talk, and then after that is some writing and some things for you to think about. There's some live links for you to follow and look into some other resources. And then again, to watch those and then bring those, what you learned, something from that you learned into your conversation. And then the last piece is contextually. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter what we think about how we lead, how we think about how we lead personally, how the theory and the theology is, but somehow we have to take all of that and put it into conversation with the real live ministry setting or a real live interpersonal setting. And so you will be working each of the 6 weeks through the eyes of a context. That will come together in a final project that I'll talk about in a minute. But if you see on there, for example, in week 1, there's an article that I've written on change for you to read. And then there says to watch this video. Sometimes they'll have you then interview somebody or do something contextually, and then bring that information into your conversation with your group. So personally, theoretically and theologically and contextually are the 3 lenses we're going to be looking at each week through change. Now, if you look to the course requirements, 30% of your class time is showing up. So this class, rather than having you post threads and talk to each other that way, you are actually going to use Google Hangout and talk to each other through a live video stream. Just like as if you were going to be showing up in the coffee shop or going to show up at somebody's house, I ask you to be respectful. And if you can't be there sometime, or if there's an issue, that you email your group and work that out. I'm asking that each time one person in that group designates to lead, and then write up your conversation and post that. And I will put a place for that online for you to post your conversations. And that's a way for me each week to hear what each group is up to. You can also then look and see what other groups are talking about as well, if that's helpful. Assigned readings. The assigned readings are all dealt with by how you engage them in your final paper. And you'll note that there are points designated at how those get integrated. But those will also be part of your discussion each week. So the annotated bibliography, one of the ways, there's so many resources on change. And one of the things I want you to learn to do is how to evaluate change resources and how to know when you would use them. So each of your small groups, either 3 or 4 of you, are going to create an annotated bibliography that can be shared with the other groups of 15 resources, some mixture between leading change, dealing with conflict, dealing with innovation, anything within the wide spectrum of what would be considered leading change. Now, some of you come from areas and you have great resources. Maybe you're an educator and there was something there that you had, or maybe you've worked in the corporate world. Those are great things to bring in. I would like it to be a mix of theory and theology. And I would like it to be a mix of books, articles, and websites. So however you want to do that, maybe each of you in your group finds 1 or 2 of each of those things, however. There's some directions on what the annotation should be like. It should be 100 to 150 words. That's not very much, but it should have some information about the author, some key points of the book, and then how you would use this resource as a ministry person. And this will be one of our first assignments posted. And again, there's a folder for each group for you to post that on. Number 4, your personal reflection paper. This is at the very end. I'm giving you all of these weeks to be reflecting and thinking about yourself as a leader from each of these different lenses. And this 2-page reflection paper is just a really way for you to kind of step back and say, what did you learn about yourself as a leader? Where are areas of growth that you might want to think about? Where are maybe things that you've learned? Maybe you had a bad experience, but you've reflected on it. You're like, these are the learnings that I've got out of that. Or maybe you watched another leader do leading change really well or poorly, and you have a learning from there. So number 4 is your leadership reflection paper. And again, there are questions throughout the week to lead to that. The last thing I want to talk about is your contextual project. That's 40% of your grade. And each of you students will be in charge of doing one. You are to pick a case. Maybe it's something in a situation you're in right now. Maybe you've come back from internship and it happened on internship. Or maybe it's happening in your home congregation and you're not in it at the moment, but you're a step removed from it and you're very aware of it. What you are to do is to do 4 parts to your case study. 1, lay it out. What are the issues? Talk about it. In 2 to 3 pages, give a thick description about what's the issue. So we're looking at confirmation and this is why. Or we're looking at a building project. Or the pastor is leaving and we're in a time of transition. Whatever it is, I want you to give a thick description of details with the ministry. Name what are some of the key events. Maybe some that have happened, maybe some that are coming up. Name some key questions that you have or that they have, and some issues that need to be addressed. Now, as you move through the rest of it, you may not address all those issues, but it's a way for you to be stepping back and say, you know what? There's been the same leader here for 20 years. And one of the really key questions is, what kind of leader do we need now? And what are we used to? And how open are we to change? So some things like that might be examples. Second is, I want you to think about that case theologically. And so pick one of the issues, pick a couple of the issues that may be clustered together and think about drawing on biblical and theological resources. Suggest 3 or 4 key ideas that might help you think of a theology of change. So if you think of leadership transition, what are some theological ideas that would go with that? Now, it could be that all communities are living in dynamic and ongoing in change, that God is active and a part of that process. That could be one idea with it. Maybe there's been a hurt, and maybe there's kind of death and resurrection or a theology of the cross that you want to bring into this. You don't have to develop these in a huge way, but I want you to name some things around that. And that could be part of a theology of change. Again, 3 to 5 pages is what that section would be. Those should have annotations or have footnotes. I should want to know where you're getting that from. Then providing a theoretical framework. All right, we've talked about the theological, how might God or how might our Christian faith intersect with that. So now talk about this same scenario, drawing on theory. We're going to have a variety. For example, this week you're going to talk about adaptive leadership and what motivates people. Is there some theory behind that would help you think about how you would address this? Maybe strategically move forward, how to deal with some interpersonal relationships, how to deal with yourself as you go into that. So that's the third section. And then the last is, what are you going to do strategically? How are you going to move from where you are to where you want to be? So the last section is about some concrete action steps and how that would be. That's 2 to 3 pages long. As you look in there, that's posted October 12th. And there are 8 points for each of those 4 sections. And then there are 5 points given for how well throughout the paper you integrated the readings that are in this. You can draw from other readings as well, but that you're also using these. And there are 3 points that there's no grammar issues and you do your citations well. So if you do that well, you get all those points. Now you'll look there, the grading. If you have late assignments, I'm going to assume everybody's on time unless I hear from you. And if you anticipate that you're not going to be able to make a deadline, please get a hold of me sooner than later, and we can negotiate another timeline. Otherwise, there will be points taken off for being late. We're all working on timelines, and I've got grades due, you've got other things due, and so that's part of what that is about. Then if you look through the last part, week 1, week 2, week 3, week 4, and week 5, and week 6, you'll see each of the themes and how each of those falls together. Now in your small group time, that last column, that's your agenda. That's at least the starting point for your conversation. So this week will be entering this course. How would you define your leadership style with regard to change and conflict? Maybe you come up with some examples. Maybe you talk about one time you did it well, one time you did it poorly. But this is where whoever's going to lead for that time to give some thought to how best to flesh each of these out. I really want you to, over these 6 weeks, dwell within each other's context, get to know them, help ask questions. Sometimes we're blind to things that are in front of us and we need the help of each other. So as you're not only thinking about your case, help others think about their case as you work the contextual piece of that all the way through. Last thing that I want to say is that the last week of class, I would like to jump in on your conversations, not to lead them, but to hear you share with each other your ministry projects. And so you'll get more on that as we get closer. I thank you for being part of this class. This is one of my favorite classes that I get to teach at Luther, and this is a new way for me to get to teach it online. So I thank you for going with me, and if you have any questions, please email me, and I'll do my best to help you.